If I'm being honest, coming off the back of 2022, it's not going to take much to impress me. While we did have plenty of great games, I don't want to disparage anything that released. I mean, it was the year of Elden Ring and God of War Ragnarok after all. Generally speaking, it was a relatively slower year for the gaming industry, mainly because tons of the highly anticipated titles many of us were looking forward to got delayed. Well, the time has come, the reckoning is upon us, those delays are nearing release, and already it's looking like 2023 is going to be a real big year for gaming, with tons of real interesting looking titles that I am looking forward to. Traditionally, January is a bit on the slower side, and this year is going to be no different, but nevertheless, it's looking like some pretty cool games are kicking off 2023. Let's jump into them. One Piece Odyssey is an RPG set in the world of the popular anime series. The game has you playing through a new tale as the Straw Hat crew. The setup is this: you're out in search of the next island, the next adventure, and then a storm blows in, causing a shipwreck and washing you ashore. In the process, your crew gets split up, there's all sorts of problems, you have to explore, battle, and find your way back together. Think traditional JRPG with a few modern day twists and tons of fan service. You'll explore the world walking around in third person, moving through the different areas of the island, completing quests, clearing dungeons, searching for items and loot, coming across various enemies to fight, walking around villages and towns, and talking with NPCs as you play through the story, all of which you'll get to do as each member of your crew. The game lets you seamlessly swap between them, with each having their own unique capabilities for exploring. So for example, Chopper can sneak through small passages, Usopp has a ranged attack to destroy objects and knock things that are out of reach, and Zoro can break through otherwise impassable areas. Every character has their own ability that sort of helps you navigate and interact with the world, which makes you think as you're doing your exploring. You know, if you come across an obstacle, what's the best way that you can bypass it? It seems like it's pretty simple on the surface, but I think it adds like an extra dimension, an extra layer to what is otherwise just kind of like overworld exploration in between the narrative and the combat. Speaking of combat, this takes the classic JRPG turn-based formula, but mixes it up by having each character battle separately rather than work as a team. Essentially, your battlefield is divided into these distinct zones, with each character separated into particular ones, and then from there you can decide who you want to have attack where, and that's going to be largely dependent on utilizing what is essentially the rock, paper, scissors system of power, speed, and technique, working to try to counter your enemies. Then beyond that, it's what you expect from turn-based battles. Everyone will have their own special attacks and abilities. You will have a set number of action points, with stronger skills costing more, and there will be different attack types and status effects, debuffs from which you pick whatever's best for each encounter, and then you take turns attacking with the enemy. There are consumables that you can use in a fight for healing or increasing your offensive or defensive capabilities, and there are also occasional special events where you will be tasked with completing a combat encounter in a specific manner or presented with some sort of a new challenge, both of which kind of help mix up the basic encounters. As an example, you might be asked to defeat an enemy with one particular member of your crew. Should you do so, you'll earn some bonus currency, experience, and items. Now, Bandai Namco has said that the main campaign of this game will last roughly 30 hours, and you can get up to 60 hours out of it if you choose to do all of these side stuff. I'm not really much into the anime. I think I've seen like a couple of episodes of it. It's pretty cool. I'm just not into anime in general. But that aside, as a video game, this does seem like a fairly competent JRPG from what I've seen. It doesn't look like it's really breaking the mold much in a lot of areas, but I imagine, especially for fans of One Piece, this is probably going to be a must play for you, unless it turns out to be totally janky garbage. All of the previews I'm seeing, though, make it seem like it's going to be a fairly competent JRPG. One Piece Odyssey is launching on January 12th, coming to PlayStation, Xbox, and PC for $59.99. Lone Ruin is a spell-based action roguelike focused on replayability, as most roguelikes are. You play as an explorer, diving deeper and deeper into this ruined magical city in search of an ancient power. So it's a roguelike. You're going to start off at level 1 with nothing but a movement skill, and then you can pick from a random offering of magic abilities, and then you use those abilities to clear each room. So every level is going to have like a timer with things ramping up in difficulty as the clock gets nearer to 0. You have to just kill and survive until the end. Doing so opens up the way to level 2, rinse and repeat. repeat. As you kill enemies, you'll gain experience. Leveling up will let you select from various things like passive boost or healing missing health or upgrading your skills with new modifiers. Along the path, you'll find more and more powerful abilities. You'll have opportunities to upgrade these, find boost for your characters. All of this kind of just building yourself up stronger and stronger to face off against more dangerous challenges. There are, of course, boss battles. These will come at separate select intervals and various parts of the leveling and progression. Diverging paths where you're given multiple options, like do you want to go into the next combat arena or do you want to go and take a break in the item shop? The game also has a point system and leaderboards for a little bit of friendly PvE competition. So this looks like a pretty basic roguelike, very simple design. I personally feel like the fun from these games really boil down to just how satisfying the combat feels and how rewarding the whole power progression is as you go through runs. And it looks like this might be a solid new entry in the roguelike genre. I definitely think it's worth keeping an eye on. Lone Ruin launches on January 12th. It's coming to PC and Switch for $14.99. The cult classic slug cat survival game Rain World will be getting its first major DLC this month. Downpour adds a bunch of content, including new areas, enemies, modes, and playable characters. There are going to be 10 new regions across thousands of maps to explore, with new environments, areas, places to navigate, and weather to survive, as well as 5 additional characters with unique abilities and playstyles. The Rivulet jumps higher and runs faster than the other slug cats, but has less time between the deadly rainstorms. The Gourmand can craft dishes or useful tools, but is slower and less maneuverable. The Artificer can transform rocks into grenades and spears into explosives at the cost of food. The Spearmaster grows spears from their tail, giving them a constant access to ranged weapons, but they cannot eat. And then finally, the Saint can swing through the air over hazards using its tongue, but can't use spears. So each of these characters are just going to provide you with a new twist and approach to navigating through the world of Rain World. Downpour also introduces 2 new modes. Challenge mode lets you test your skills in multiple pre-constructed scenarios, adapting to each room as the difficulty increases. And Safari mode has you revisiting areas once explored safely, but this time through the eyes of an observer, and you actually are able to control and play as the various creatures to influence the scene. Really cool additional ways to check out the game. This expansion also includes things like new tutorialized hints, alternate routing options, a new map system, handy collectible tracker for storyline completion, and more. I played through Rain World last year. I really enjoyed the game. It was a tremendously difficult experience with really interesting AI and gameplay physics, and it was just a really cool world. It was a fun game to play. It was a very pleasant surprise, and I'm super excited to see that they're getting such a major update. Rain World Downpour launches on January 19th. It'll be coming to PC first and console sometime later in the year. Forspoken is an upcoming open-world action RPG from Square Enix that really embodies the stranger in a strange land trope. You play as Frey, a girl from modern-day New York who mysteriously gets transported to this magical world where everything is in peril. It's full of interesting characters and deadly creatures, but you just want to find your way back home, but first you've got to stop this world-ending threat, of course, and you'll do so with the help of an ancient cuff that gives you powers and also talks to you. So this is a third-person action combat game. The emphasis is on the use of elemental magic. You've got a variety of options like close combat and ranged, trap and ambush abilities. In fact, there's over 100 spells in the game broken up into what they call 3 distinct categories of attack magic, support magic, and then your ultimates. So while fighting, you're going to cycle between the various abilities you have equipped. You do so with this time-slowing radial menu, allowing you to just have a ton of diversity and control while in combat. So you can throw out a fireball and then swap to a tornado, and then maybe you call in a meteor or summon up like these lava creatures. You'll want to carefully select which abilities you use to try to counter your enemies, as there is a whole system of elemental affinities and weaknesses. And like you might come across an ice golem, for example, who's weak to fire. And so far, from what I've seen, the combat really appears to be one of the strong suits of Forspoken. Forspoken. Beyond that, traversal is another major aspect of this game. You're going to be quickly moving through this big open world, zipping around the map with a multitude of movement options. You've got the ability to sprint, to dodge, teleport, slide, glide, grapple, and mantle on the terrain. As you move through the world, you'll encounter enemies, find loot, uncover secrets, and various activities. The world is made up of these various realms, which are basically like zones with their own theming. So, you know, we've got plains and forests, mountains, deserts, these castles, ruins, abandoned cities, a lot of your traditional fantasy locations. And of course, being an open world game, it has much of what you would expect from the genre. Tons of different enemy types that are themed to their various locations. There will be big boss battles. You'll fight dragons, elementals, and various types of behemoths. A variety of side quests and activities like these break storms, which are world events that call in challenging enemies. Guild towers, which are these large multi-story towers full of loot. They're refuges that act as shelters where you can take a break to craft and upgrade your gear. There are treasure chests that you'll find out in the world, various resources to gather. There are dungeons to jump into. You'll go through, fight groups of enemies, find stuff, and fight a boss at the end to collect loot. And the game has a progression system as you'll acquire gear, level up. There'll be various types of customization for you to engage with. Now, I'll say that I have more or less liked what I've seen of the game, especially the most recent footage. A lot of the early stuff seemed a little rough. There seemed to be performance issues and glitchiness and just overall kind of jank to the game. But a lot of the latest stuff that I've seen, the most recent gameplay showcases, have looked a lot better. It does seem like the game is coming together. I do know that there is a demo currently out available on console, and reception unfortunately has been a bit mixed, which makes me sad to see, but we'll have to wait and see how this game turns out once it officially releases. Forspoken launches on January 24th, coming to PC and PlayStation for $69.99. Warlander is a third-person multiplayer action combat game that combines MOBA mechanics and medieval castle sieges with up to 100 players a match. It's actually the spiritual successor to Happy Wars, an Xbox exclusive from 2012, and as such, it has many of the same fundamental systems just wrapped up in a new package. So there are 3 playable classes. There's the warrior, who is tanky and very strong at close range damage dealing, the mage, who's a bit of a glass cannon but can deal a lot of damage from afar, and the cleric, who is the support class, all about healing, buffing, and reviving teammates. So you will take these characters into one of the game's 2 modes. 2 Army Battle is the MOBA mode, where 2 teams fight over 3 lanes with towers and cores to defend. And then there is 5 Army Battle, with each army having a castle at one point of 5 points on the map and lanes pushing towards the other enemy castles. These 5 armies battle each other until just one remains. And in both of these modes, there's a variety of elements to them beyond the action combat, because again, it's like a medieval castle siege game. So you'll be capturing towers, you'll be building devices, completing objectives, manning turrets and catapults, and all sorts of siege equipment, and all of this with the goal of destroying the enemy structures and players. There's also this whole commander system where one player gets to select objectives for the team to complete. Of course, ideally, this helps lead the team to victory, or you get a commander who's a complete troll and they lead you to defeat, I guess. I don't know. The game has a lot of progression systems as well, so as you play, you're going to do things like unlock new weapons and armor. You'll also level up, gaining access to talents and skills, and then there is further specialization with this valor system where playing a class levels them up, unlocking new, more powerful versions. From what I've seen and heard of this game, this actually looks really cool. It seems like it could be a fun time, a cool game to mess around with. And you know what? You don't see a lot of large-scale multiplayer games very often like this. Just the fact that they can get so hectic with 100 players running around, that alone can be very entertaining. And I like the idea, the structure of, especially I think the idea of these 5 teams, 100 players with castles all around, all fighting for control, almost like Battle Royale-esque to be the last team standing. That sounds pretty cool. Large-scale games are really fun because of just how crazy things can get with so much happening all the time, all around you, with explosions and characters, casting spells and dying and charging into battle. It can be really cool, and I've heard some pretty decent things about this game, so I'm looking forward to it. Warlander is going to be free to play. It launches on January 24th, and it is coming to PC via Steam. Next up, we have got Dead Space, rebuilt from the ground up with many modern-day improvements. They have totally overhauled the visuals and audio, but also added a lot of gameplay gameplay enhancements that promise to stay faithful to the original while making Dead Space feel more up to date, more modern. If you never played the original, Dead Space was a game that had you taking on the role of Isaac Clarke, an engineer who was sent to repair a mining ship in a desolate part of the galaxy. Upon arrival, he shortly realizes things are not good. Some real creepy stuff starts happening, and then the necromorphs roll in. After that, things go downhill very, very quickly. I played the game when it first came out back in 2011. It was great, a very memorable and fun experience, and the remaster is looking really solid. I mean, they have clearly vastly improved the visuals and done a lot of work with things like environmental and lighting effects. It looks awesome, the atmosphere is that much better, and just the core game is really good. If I do have time this month, I would happily play through Dead Space again. It was one of my all-time favorite sci-fi horror games. The Dead Space remake is launching on January 27th. It is coming to PC, PlayStation, and Xbox for $59.99. So those are the main games that I wanted to highlight for this month's releases, but we do have a few honorable mentions that are worth mentioning. Gatewalkers is a top-down co-op action RPG where players travel between procedurally generated worlds, slaying enemies, and collecting loot. This seems like a Diablo-like with survival mechanics. Outside of the combat, you'll have to do things like manage thirst, try to stay out of extreme weather conditions and toxic environments, and then there's also the crafting system where you make items and gear to assist in that survival, and then you do the ARPG loot stuff thing, and you can do this with other players because of the co-op. Looks pretty interesting. OddBallers is a multiplayer party game with different takes on dodgeball. You'll battle against other players in all sorts of silly little mini games and challenges. Seems like it could be a fun time. Inkulinati is a medieval strategy game where you command a squad of battle-ready animals. This kind of reminds me of Darkest Dungeon, but you have a team of dogs and rabbits and turtles and stuff. The game also has a very distinct visual style. It seems to be clearly going for this aesthetic of this like hand-drawn medieval cartoon. It's clearly nevertheless a very interesting presentation. Warhammer Soul Arena is a Warhammer-themed auto chess game. This was actually supposed to launch last month. It was on last month's list, but shortly after we released that video, the game got pushed back. Think Teamfight Tactics or Dota Underlords. It's an auto chess game. You try to basically build this army to counter whatever your opponent's armies are and make your way through various rounds, fighting against different players' teams and trying to be the one that ultimately comes out on top. There will be a whole leveling and progression system where you can make each of the different characters stronger. It's a pretty cool type of game. I actually really enjoyed Dota Underlords, and this seems like just a Warhammer version of that, which sounds neat. And then there is Superfuse, an isometric hack and slash ARPG. You and up to 4 friends can take on waves of enemies as you fight your way through a comic book inspired story and world. Unlock skills which can be combined and fused together with this interesting looking tile based skill grid system. This actually seems like a pretty solid title. Lots of ARPGs coming out this month, which actually is I'm happy with. Some really like interesting twist on the genre coming up here. And then also I just wanted to quickly mention a couple of popular Ubisoft games are coming on Steam. Both The Division 2 and Watch Dogs Legions will be releasing this month on Steam. Played both of those games, like them more or less. I did the typical thing where I'll play a Ubisoft game for like 10 hours and then be like, okay, I don't need to play the other 100. This, I get the picture. Which actually did make me kind of sad, in particular with Division 2's case, because I really loved the first Division for all of its flaws. It was a great experience, and I just loved the setting, the wintry atmosphere, the New York in a snowstorm, post-apocalyptic, with the dark zone. So many elements came together with the first Division. Division 2 really just didn't click that much with me, but that's neither here nor there. Division 2 and Watch Dogs is launching on Steam this month. There you go. And that just about does it for this month's list. Again, January, it's just typically slow all around in everything and all entertainment industries, but in particularly in gaming. It's not a ton going on. Things will start to ramp up in the subsequent months, but still, I think there's some pretty cool looking titles. Definitely some games to fill some time this month. Like I said, if I have the time, I will totally play through Dead Space again. I definitely want to jump in and mess around with Warlander. That seems like it could be fun, especially with some friends. Forspoken, I don't know. It's kind of a coin toss at this point, but I like exploring open worlds and the magic system looks cool. I love Rain World, would happily play this DLC. Lone Ruin, you know, mess around with it for a weekend. That would probably be the extent of it. And One Piece Odyssey, while I'm not that much into anime, this seems like a competent JRPG, like I said. And there you go. That is this month's list. As always, thank you all so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.